Hello, my name is Chloe. Welcome to my channel. Today I'm bringing to you my January wrap up. So January wasn't my strongest reading month by any means. I did have some really good books. I gave the most 5 stars I've given in a month in about a year. But yeah, unfortunately, I just didn't read that much. And I had a lot of fun things going on. A lot of weekends where I prioritized going out and hanging out with people over staying in and reading. And then a lot of nights where I just watched TV or I watched YouTube. I just chilled. I didn't really dedicate as much time to reading as I usually do. I'm not upset by it, but if I want to get anywhere close to 200 books this year, I need to not do it quite as much in the following months. However, I did read 13 books in January, which was 4,565 pages. I'm not going to do comparison stats to December. I'm just going to start the slate clean. So that is what I read. And that averaged out at 147 pages a day, which feels about right. And the average length of the books I was reading was 351 pages. 8 of the books I read were physical and 5 of them were audiobooks. So I did use audiobooks quite a lot in January. I had 1 book that I didn't rate, 2 2-stars, 3 3-stars, 3 4-stars, and 4 5-star books, which gave me an average rating of a 3.8, which is pretty high for me. So let's go through the books. Starting with the book I didn't rate is Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde by Robert Louis Stevenson. I probably wouldn't have picked this one up anytime soon, but I was doing Winterween and I had to swap out a prompt that was to read a novella or listen to a spooky audiobook. So I combined both of those and listened to a spooky audiobook novella. And yeah, it just didn't really do anything for me. I don't know what it is about the story that I just didn't really engage with at all. Is it because everybody knows the base level story of Jekyll and Hyde, so nothing was shocking? It was like finding out something you already knew, but also working for the information because it's a classic. So yeah, I just didn't really vibe with that one a hell of a lot. I haven't given it a rating because I don't think it's the book's fault. This book is clearly amazing, but I just personally couldn't engage with it. So I don't think that necessarily means it's a bad book. It just isn't a book for me. Another book that just isn't for me is my first 2-star rating of this video, and that is Queen Takes Rose by Katie Robert. I am really sorry, but this one did not do anything for me. This is a romance between 2 characters that are mentioned in previous books, so I don't want to spoil anything, but it is the final book of the Wicked Villains series, and that is a series that takes Disney characters, flips them so you kind of know who they are, but puts them in a club that you have to be over 18 to access, let's say. Some of the books I've really vibed with. There's like something about the characters that draws me in, but these 2 characters in this book, I didn't care for them at all. I've probably cared for them in previous books, but this, reading it as a blank slate, I just genuinely, like, there was nothing about them that made me want them to be in a relationship, that made me want the relationship to win. I wasn't like invested in them at all, which is such a shame really, because I just wanted to have another book in this series that I really like. I really like number 1 and number 3, but apart from that, they felt really flat to me. I know that these are just churned out as smutty reads, and really that is all they are, is smutty reads. But I also need to care about the characters. Like I want to want the characters to be together, not just read like literally sex. So yeah, I didn't like this one. Then the other 2-star rating I gave is sadly Think of a Number by John Verdon. So I had higher hopes for this. It was a gift from the lovely Chelsea for Christmas. It was very easy to read. I will give this book that I would sit down for half an hour and I'd read 90 pages. Like, it was very, very quick. However, the plot twist in this, like the whole pinnacle of this book, I think was so obvious and so cheesy that it kind of hurt my brain a little bit. So overall, we're following Dave, who is a retired New York police detective, and there is a new crime on the scene. An old acquaintance of his comes to him for help because he's received this threatening note, and that acquaintance then dies. I can tell you that because it's in the 2nd paragraph of the blurb. However, that doesn't happen until 150 pages in, so there is quite a lot of reading to do to get to any payoff in this book. Like I said, I didn't actually hate the writing. I feel like this writer is probably very good. I wouldn't buy one of his books, but I would consider picking it up from the library. Like, I wouldn't be against trying another one. But yeah, it was just a lot of book. And when we finally got to who the killer was and what their motivations were, it was just a bit naff, unfortunately. This is a slightly older title. I say that knowing that it came out in 2010, so it's really not old, but in terms of thrillers, it might have felt a little bit outdated, and maybe we're all more twisty and weird now and guess things like this without thinking. So yeah, wasn't a massive fan of this one, but I did really appreciate having the experience to read it. It just didn't thrill me. Wow guys, I don't know if you'll believe this, but I actually started filming this video 4 hours ago. That is how many interruptions I've had. I've even gone and got a new set of nails in that time. So please excuse the fact that everything looks exactly the same, but my nails are different. The lighting may suck also because we're now on completely artificial light, no daylight. Anyway, we'd gotten up to my 3-star read. So the first 3-star I have here is Rewind by Catherine Ryan Howard. Looking back, I could probably rate this a little bit lower, but I know I wasn't giving it my full attention. So I've not had the best track record with Catherine Ryan Howard, and then this was one of the oldest thrillers on my TBR. So I was like, come on, we got to Winterween, let's just read it, because I need to get it off the TBR at this point. And it's got a very interesting premise. It is about a secret camera hidden in a Airbnb situation, and a man watching the videos of like the women who stay in these apartments. But then the woman on camera gets killed, and we are following the CCTV footage like backwards to rewind, imagine, to find out what's been going on there. And I just wasn't thrilled. I didn't see it as like a mystery that I had to dig into. I wasn't so invested in finding out what was going on. I do get a little bit lost in this author's work, and I don't know whether audiobook was the best way to consume this, because I haven't had the best success in the past. However, I still was lost, and the author actually includes like a final chapter that wraps up the whole story. Without that, I would have needed to Google it, so I can only give it 3 stars. I probably should give it less, but the premise is really interesting and the way it's told is interesting. I should be more positive because I did give it 3, which is it's fine. The characters just felt a little bit samey. The story wasn't exciting, but you know, I read it. Next up, we have Everyone in This Room Will Someday Be Dead by Emily Austen, and I had very, very high hopes for this one. This is a book I read for my reading weird books, and it was definitely weird. We're following a girl called Gilda who is in her 20s and she's not really sure what she's doing with her life. She stumbles upon this job like interview by accident. She's gone into a Catholic church because there was some therapy advertised. So she goes in and she actually ends up accidentally interviewing for a job in the Catholic Church, but she is a lesbian, she is atheist, she's not really got any place being in a Catholic Church, but she decides to go with this job anyway. And it's basically just her life, her dealing with romance, her dealing with not really knowing what she's supposed to be doing in this life, and it was kind of interesting. It was a book of nothing. There was also a little murder mystery in here, which I found quite interesting, and I did like how that played out. It was also her kind of dealing with her sexuality while being in a religious setting, but not being religious herself, that was quite interesting. But yeah, overall, I'd go with interesting for this. It wasn't quite as weird and wacky as I hoped, so I don't really have many insanely strong feelings on it. But 3 stars, just not one that I need to revisit or hold on to. And then the final 3-star read I have is The Arrangement by Kirsten Modglin? It's on the screen. This was a complete stumble on it pretty much last day of the month. It was an audiobook suggested on Libby, and I thought, screw it, let's find out what this is about. And the first 40 to 50% I wasn't very interested, but the ending was really, really good. So I've settled on 3 stars. We're following a husband and wife who are a little bit bored in their romantic relationship. Everything's just a bit samey. So they decide that the way to spice up their life is that the wife's gonna go on dates with randomers on Tuesday nights, and he's gonna go on Thursday nights, and they are gonna do whatever they want on these dates, but then they're gonna come home to each other. That premise kind of goes on for like 40% of the book, and it's just them kind of existing in slight marital turmoil. Like, it's not too exciting. Actually, I shouldn't give you too many details because I have just said it's 40% of the way in, but the wife ends up on a date with somebody and he may not be all that he seems. So the actual dating part of this was kind of boring. Definitely not one to recommend if you don't like cheating in books, because it's pretty much justifying cheating through the whole book. Saying that, I knew I was a monogamist why is that word always really hard to say? But I think I'm maybe more of one than I thought. Like, everything in this was rubbing me up the wrong way. However, I did really like the thriller aspect of it as it developed. So don't know whether I'd recommend it. I have recommended it to certain friends that I feel would enjoy it, but I just don't think everyone needs to love this book. Next up, moving on to my 4 and 5 stars, and I think I have every single one in front of me. First up, my first book of the year, I gave 4 stars to The Regrets by Amy Bonifants. I can't really tell you all too much about this book because I'm still very confused in myself. But this is effectively a romance with a ghost. It's a man who's died and he basically gets sent to like whatever happens next, but he's turned up a little bit too early. There's been a mistake. So they send him back and they're like, right, just exist. Don't fall in love, don't see anyone from your past because you can't continue that relationship. It's a very interesting look at death, but also at relationships. I'm trying to make this like more intelligent than it is, but it's actually really, really weird. Some of the reviews on the back, it's just like, she is weird, tender, and full of magic. Maybe that weird, tender, maybe not full of magic. But it's literally a romance with a ghost. That's it. But it's not like a smutty romance. There is sex in this. There is actually quite a lot of sexual content in this. Not like written in a spicy romance kind of way. It's just written as like a, well, this is going on kind of way. And the writing's just really strange. I've said nothing positive about this, but it's 4 stars. I wanted it to be a 5. I wanted it to be something I could never explain but love. I did have some like gripes with it. It wasn't the best thing I've ever read, but just something about it felt really special. So I guess this is living on my shelves for the foreseeable future. Next up, we have a reread this month. I read Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros, and I actually listened to the graphic audio. I don't know whether that changed my rating. I gave it 4 stars the first time round, and then I've gone for 4 stars again. I kind of would like to read it a 3rd time and tab it, but that's not on the cards for right now. I'm sure everybody knows what Fourth Wing is about at this point. We're living in a war college, and we have dragons that you, I was gonna say mate with. You definitely don't mate with the dragons. You bond with the dragons. But yes, you, as it says on the front, you graduate or you die is the whole premise. We are following Violet Sorrengail as she embarks on her first year at the War College, and I really do like it. As it says on the front actually as well, brutal games, grumpy dragons, sizzling sexual tension. That's pretty much covers the whole book. I liked the amount of sexual tension in this. I remember the first time I was like, oh, I wish it was more romantic. I actually did like the level of romance in this. I felt like it was quite well balanced with the fantasy stuff. We're not just going in and throwing smut at every corner for the sake of it. It actually felt real. I love the dragons in this. The dragons are my favourite part, and if you would have picked up Chloe from 5 years ago, saying that she liked dragons in a book would just be completely surreal, but I do really, really enjoy the dragons in this. I basically reread this in the intention of reading Iron Flame and then getting ready for Onyx Storm. That hasn't happened. I've only read Fourth Wing, but I did have a good time with it, and it's really like inspired me to carry on reading the series. I have owned Iron Flame since it came out, and I got Onyx Storm on pre-order, but I haven't gone there yet, but I will. And the final 4-star book I have, and I actually really, really, really like it, there was just something stopping me give it 5 stars, is A Fate Inked in Blood by Danielle L. Jensen. This is a Norse inspired, like Norse mythology inspired fantasy. I read it and tabbed it, and I had such a fantastic time. I really like this story. We're following Freya, who is in a marriage that she'd rather not be in, but she was kind of paired off by her dad. And then one day Bjorn comes to town and she's like, oh, he's hot, but I'm in a really grumpy marriage. Then the Jarl, I think it's Jarl, no idea, J-A-R-L, he comes along and he's like, you are the shield maiden, you've been gifted by the gods and you are now going to marry me. Please leave your husband pronto and please ignore my son, Bjorn. So lots of crossed over relationships that are very interesting to explore, that's what I'll say. I didn't really have a tabbing system. It was just anything I wanted to keep hold of, apparently. I think the only reason I can't give this 5 stars is it did take me like a week to read. There wasn't a moment when I couldn't put it down. I could very easily stop and then carry on later on. It wasn't gripping me that way, but I did thoroughly enjoy my time reading it. I am looking out for the sequel. I think it comes out in May, so I want to get my hands on a matching Book of the Month edition. I have seen the special edition in Waterstones. I think it's like 20 quid. I don't think I need to part with that, but I would quite like a matching Book of the Month edition. Yeah, I'm still talking and I haven't really said much about this actual book. If you liked, let's just think on Sarah J Maas terms, if you're in Sarah J Maas for A Court of Thorns and Roses, but Throne of Glass was like a bit too far, then I wouldn't recommend this, because it does go into like the mythology fantasy aspect quite a lot more like war and battles and stuff, so not quite just the nice romance with fairies. There's no fairies in this, I'm just comparing it to Sarah J Maas. So yeah, if you're like Throne of Glass was a bit too fantastical, then maybe don't go with these, but it's definitely not placed for like high fantasy girlies. This is for, I'm trying to read a bit more fantasy, and you said there's sexy men, so yeah, that's the vibe. If you want to read am I a booktuber? Am I a booktuber? I don't know. Bit more fantasy, strong female character, sexy Viking man. There we go. And now, can you believe it? I'm on my 4 5-star reads. I haven't had this many 5 stars in a while. They're not all rereads. I'm just, yeah, I'm so happy that these are here. The first one that I knew was going to be a 5-star is A Court of Silver Flames by Sarah J Maas. This is book, what is it, number 4 in the ACOTAR series. I actually had a really good time with this. I probably, you know, if I picked this up and I hadn't read the rest of the series, I hadn't developed a relationship with the characters, is this a 5-star? I don't know. I don't know, but I had a thoroughly good time with it. I don't want to say too much about the story because I feel like a lot of people spoil it accidentally. All I will say is that it's Nesta's story, and we're following her coming to terms with what has happened in her life and reflecting on any sort of trauma that's happened before. That's all we're given, because I don't want to spoil this book. I've seen a lot of things that people casually say and it like makes me cringe that you're giving away stuff. It is definitely different from the rest of the books. We don't have much like external fantasy is how I'm going to word it. It is quite rooted in learning about her as a character rather than like the last book had an epic war. It is a little bit different. It is quite long, but I had a really good time with it. I don't see a world where it could have been less than 5 stars, and I'm very excited to see which book we get next. I know who I want the book to be about and I know what I want to happen in it, but is that going to be what it is? I don't know. I will say with this series, when the next book gets announced, I will be pre-ordering it. I will be reading it on release day because I have to know now. I'm caught up with this series. I'm obsessed. And if you see me order the next book and then not read it straight away, you have full permission to shout at me, because I should have just read this when it came out and enjoyed the hype with everyone else. I've had this book 2021, this was published. I'm pretty sure I pre-ordered it. I'm not even joking, and I've only just read it. So very happy to have finally read this one. Next up, another one that I knew was going to be 5 stars and just, it has to be here. It's Mina and the Undead by Amy McCall. If you don't know, I am in the very fortunate position that I can call Amy McCall one of my friends. And yeah, I encouraged my entire Patreon to read her first book in January. So obviously I was reading it too. If you don't know, for some reason, this is following Mina as she moves to New Orleans to move in with her older sister for the summer, and her older sister has a roommate, Jared, who is quite fine. She gets a part-time job being an actor in like a horror movie haunted house, and I just think that's so fantastic. As she gets this job though, there are a series of murders happening in the town that just don't feel quite right. I'm trying not to give too much away without knowing what everyone knows about this story, but there is somebody in New Orleans who is replicating the worst serial killings of the town. I just think it's so much fun. It combines lots of things I like. We have serial killers, we have vampires, and we have like horror movies. It's just so fun. If you haven't picked up this series yet, I thoroughly recommend you do it. I am biased, I will fully say that I'm biased, but I do think this is a really fun time. Next up, kind of a surprise to nobody, but I didn't know if I was going to give this 5 stars. We have Layla by Colleen Hoover. This one was interesting. This is definitely Colleen Hoover's first book in a slightly new genre, but I won't go into the full details of that without like spoiling the book. So we're following Leeds and Layla, who meet at a wedding and they strike up a romance, but very soon into the start of their relationship a tragic accident happens and Layla is not in the best shape. When she's all recovered, Leeds and Layla decide to go back to the B&B where this wedding was to reignite the spark in their relationship and just figure out what's kind of going wrong, whether it is within Layla from the accident. I actually think this was really good. I don't know whether I'd describe myself as biased on Colleen Hoover, Hoover because I will pick flaws when I find flaws. This wasn't flawless, but the enjoyment it gave me was definitely a 5-star read. I had a very, very enjoyable time reading this. I don't think everyone would absolutely love it, but this is my level of weird. And you know what? I think like with a combination of stuff I read in previous years, I'm gonna find my level of weird in 2025. And this was so it. I made my colleague read it pretty much instantly and she was like, yeah, I don't really understand what happened there, but that was fun. That's exactly the vibes I like. So yeah, 5 stars to Layla. And last but by no means least, this book was probably the biggest shock to me because I've had such a mixed review on this author's work, but Home Before Dark by Riley Sager had to have 5 stars. We are following Maggie, and 25 years ago, her family moved out in a rush of this house they just bought. They flee Bainbury Hall, and her dad actually writes a book about the haunted house and everything that happened to Maggie while she was there, but she's still a very young child at this point. Sorry, I just thought I had nail varnish on my fingers. When I say I've just had these done, I mean like 25 minutes ago. So she has grown up in a world where everyone knows about these haunted experiences that happen to her, but she can't personally remember them. Her dad dies 25 years later in the future, and she finds out that she has got Bainbury Hall in the will. So she has to go back and sort out all the affairs and basically discover whether it is true, whether all of the hauntings and spooky scariness actually happened. I really enjoyed this. I am not a massive fan of the book, The Haunting of Hill House. I was a little bit bored, but I have watched the TV adaptation and I love that. This was definitely like that level of spooky. It was just weird. I read quite a lot of it in one go. I think it was on like Patreon reading sprints, and I physically had to put it down because I was about to go to bed and I just felt so uncomfortable. Maybe that's it. I wasn't terrified, but I was uncomfortable. And if a book can make me feel like that, it has to get 5 stars. I had a thoroughly good time with this. I didn't guess any of the twists and turns. Every time I thought I'd understood what was going on, there was another twist, and I just thought it was really well done. So I think this is Riley Sager's best work. So there we have it, guys. Those are the, what was it, 13 books that I read in January. Please do let me know down in the comments if you have read any of these books, if you have any opinions on any of these, and let me know what your favorite book of January was. For now though, as I said, it's taken me a very long time to film this video, so I need to get off, do some things with my evening, and actually come back and film my January book haul too, which is massive. So that will be coming to you next week, I believe. For now, I'll stop yapping. Thank you so much for being here, guys. I really appreciate you. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.